All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking an incredibly atmospheric, neon-soaked manifesto that treats the human brain not as some unsolvable mystery, but literally as a piece of California municipal infrastructure. It's this wild, fascinating blend of avant-garde biofiction and hard-edged neurophilosophy. And it asks us to completely rethink how we heal and, honestly, how we build our own cognition. Minds are not fog, but fiber. That striking quote right there instantly pulls us away from the old idea of the mind as this passive, drifting cloud. Instead, it thrusts us into a gritty, engineered reality. It completely sets the tone for everything we're about to explore today. We aren't dealing with mystical vapors here, folks. We are dealing with biological wiring, routing, and tangible physical networks. So let's look at the paradigm shift from surrender to structure. To really get a grip on this dense biofiction, we first need to understand the fundamental clash between the old way of cognitive healing and the radical new way the author is pitching. The established model, known as REBU, is portrayed in our source text as a season of mercy. Think of it as a way to loosen the rigid beliefs and narratives that cage us in. By relaxing our top-down predictions, what we call our priors, we deliberately allow bottom-up sensory noise, and basically entropy, to flood the system. It's a therapeutic surrender. You're just opening all the windows to let the storm blow through. But here's the catch. In a constantly chaotic world, the text argues that the passive solvent of rebus actually needs to be replaced by the active splicer of recursive vector interference, or RVI. You see, the author argues that you can't just surrender to a perpetual storm forever, kind of like the relentless Santa Ana winds out in LA. Eventually, you have to build. You have to move from passive dissolution to targeted active precision. That brings us to engineering the mind and the physics of coherence. What's truly fascinating here is how RVI moves from abstract philosophy to literal civil engineering right inside the brain. Instead of just letting go, RVI actively weaponizes loops. It works by taking two asynchronous cognitive streams, say a sensory drive and a memory trace, and intentionally colliding them at shared neural hubs. It engineers a crash. And when these waves meet perfectly in time, they induce constructive interference. They form a stable, load-bearing ridge of meaning. Then you use recurrence or repetition to literally write that brand new shortcut straight into your neural tissue. And the absolutely crucial point here is that this isn't just poetry. The author maps this out using a precise mathematical framework. Variables like amplitude translate directly to power, because, let's face it, two whispers can't make a shout. Phase translates to the precise timing required to make waves build up rather than cancel each other out. And tau, that represents the biological architecture, the literal 10 to 20 millisecond delay as a signal travels down a white matter tract. It is literal phase-aware engineering. And this has massive real-world implications. The text offers this incredibly grounded example. Imagine using this RVI method to align municipal bus delay telemetry with local asthma clinic admission data. By finding the interference pattern between those two completely different streams at 6:40 a.m., they can actually anticipate and prevent medical crises for kids waiting out in the wind. Insight isn't just discovered, it is constructed for the public good. Which brings us to a huge pivot in the text, transitioning from the mechanics of RVI to the underlying medium of the brain itself. If RVI is the software, what on earth is the hardware? Well, what if the brain fundamentally runs on light? Let's look at the biology of light, or photonic consciousness. The text synthesizes neuroscience and quantum physics to argue that our cognition actually operates through light-based processes. It proposes that the myelin sheets, the protective insulation around our nerves, actually act as optical waveguides. Essentially, they are biological fiber optics, capable of trapping and transmitting biophotons an incredible 30 million times faster than our traditional chemical signals. This astonishing speed could actually explain the binding problem of consciousness. You know, how our brain unifies all this distributed information into one seamless, instantaneous experience. That leads to a beautifully profound equation framing consciousness itself. E, your experiential intensity, is simply the biophoton flux multiplied by recursive self-reference. That's the mind infinitely observing itself. All of that is then divided by the time-bound identity, or the ego. It's an elegant, almost poetic way of saying that consciousness is just light recursively observing itself across time. Now moving on to the portable protocol, a one-page recipe for hacking the storm. Bringing this back to the neon-lit streets of the text setting, Neo-Edo, the author provides a highly practical, step-by-step protocol. This takes those grand theories of light and gives you a way to implement them. It turns abstract sci-fi into a concrete checklist. First, select your carrier, something simple like your breath or a steady tapping rhythm. Next, tag your cognitive vectors, literally binding a thought or memory to that specific rhythm. Then, nudge the face so the signals align perfectly in time. And finally, walk the ridge. When you feel that sudden clarity of interference, you have to act on it immediately to wire it into your tissue. But we can't ignore the critical chorus, voices that refuse easy praise. This explainer wouldn't be complete without looking at the author's own brilliant counter-narrative. This biofiction doesn't just present a techno-utopian dream. It imparts a fierce critique of its own system by channeling literary icons. Take William S. Burroughs. He acts as a visceral, stark warning here. His voice reminds us that if you can map and measure cognition to this degree, you can market it. And if you can market it, eventually the state or corporations can mandate it. It's a pretty bleak caution against turning the inner mind into an exploitable supply chain. Then we have Joan Didion, whose critique cuts like a cold knife. She warns that if we optimize the mind purely for efficiency and data, we are treating the human soul as a mere firmware update. I mean, what happens to the unmeasured, ruinous eruption of creativity? A system purely focused on engineered alignment leaves absolutely no room for raw, unquantifiable awe. And Chogyam Trungpa reminds us that trying to micromanage your sorrow into a neat biometric feature set strips away our essential humanity. To truly befriend your mind isn't too violently engineered into submission. Because ritual without risk is just logistics. To constructively combat these massive risks, the RVI protocol embeds strict, solution-oriented ethical guardrails. These rules are designed to keep the power in the hands of the neighborhood, not the corporation. Think about it. If the tool can't be taught at a local rec center, it's a leash, not a method. And you must taper off the scaffold so the user doesn't become totally dependent on the technology. The entire ethical framework of this dense, poetic universe can be beautifully distilled into one single, uncompromising rule. Consent is the modulation index. Harm is the stop condition. It is a fierce dedication to ensuring this tech serves the individual, rather than coercing them. Which leaves us with this final lingering thought to unpack, long after the Santa Ana winds die down. As we map our minds into fiber optics and engineered interference, are we freeing ourselves to walk new ridges of meaning, or are we just laying the groundwork for the ultimate surveillance of the self? Something to think about.